Hello, this is Tracy Wilkerson. I'm a Spanish teacher at Gould, and I will be traveling with ninth graders to Ecuador in March as part of ninth grade 4-point. This screencast is part of a presentation that was offered during the winter parent and family weekend. So for some of you, the information will be a review, and for others, it'll be a chance for you to get the information from the meeting that you were unable to attend. So I wanted to first introduce the adults that will be traveling with your children to Ecuador. Todd Siegman is a science teacher and a basketball coach, among other things, here at Gould. He has 2 children who graduated from Gould and a daughter who is a 9th grader. Todd will be returning to Ecuador. Last time he was there was several years ago, 30 years ago, I believe, when he was traveling in South America for a few months with his girlfriend, who's now his wife. Todd found when he looked at some of his old journals that he will be traveling to some of the same places that he went 30 years ago. So it'll be interesting for him to see what's different and what's the same of the places he visited. I am Tracy Wilkerson, and I teach Spanish at Gould. This year I'm teaching Spanish 1 and 3, which means that I work with a lot of the 9th graders, and some of them will be traveling with us to Ecuador. I've had the opportunity to travel to Ecuador twice with Gould students, and I've gone several times to South and Central America on personal trips. I'm super excited about traveling with 9th graders for 4-point. It's one of the few opportunities that kids have to have a really impactful experience in a relatively short amount of time. And it's exciting to be able to facilitate that and to travel with them. So, since I'm a Spanish teacher, you know that we will be focusing some on the language. Putting some effort into communicating in someone's native language is a great way to bridge gaps and start to get to know people. All of the students will be traveling with a little phrase book, which will be helpful, and we'll support them as they experiment with their new language skills. Spanish language skills are definitely not required for this trip, but they will be improving as we go. So Spanish is the most popular language in Ecuador, but there are also native languages that are still spoken commonly. So in addition to Spanish, we'll also be learning a little bit of Quechua. So phrases like Ashka Paragachu will become commonplace. That means thank you in Quechua. One of the places where we're staying is called Sinchiwarmi, which means strong woman. Sinchikari is strong man. So students will be getting a little bit of language immersion along with their cultural immersion. Some information about 4-point. The 4-point experience goes through all 4 grades at Gould. And 9th grade, the focus is immersion. 10th grade is expression. Students are on campus working with artists. I would also include with that community service. That's a big part of the 10th grade experience. 11th grade is self-awareness. That's when our 11th graders go out in the woods winter camping for, winter. And then 12th grade, the students have self-designed independent projects. So there's a logical progression that works through our whole 4-point experience. So the goals of the 4-point program through all 4 years include to build class unity through a shared experience, to provide opportunity to gain insight and confidence in a different setting, to provide faculty and students insights into each other outside the traditional classroom setting. As you think about traveling, what we're going to do, traveling in Ecuador for 2 weeks in a small group, it's pretty easy to see that we're going to hit those goals straight on. So the types of learning that come through these 4-point experiences include empathy, sense of self, performance, relationships, and decision-making. This photo here is from Mitad del Mundo, which is the equator. This is the statue at the equator where we will most likely go visit. Empathy. What do I notice others doing, thinking, seeing, feeling? While we're traveling, there will be some things that are so familiar to us. Humans are humans and people are people, and no matter where you go, there are some things that are absolutely we all have in common. And then there are some things that are different. So gaining an understanding of those similarities and differences is a huge part of what will come from traveling with 4-point. Through that also comes a greater sense of self. Where do I fit in this world? Coming from probably, leaving snow and leaving our boarding school in Maine to go down to the jungle where we'll be with people who are subsistence farming in the jungle. Who are they and who are we? Relationships, learning with others, homestays, school visits. Homestays may be the most impactful part of our 4-point travel experience. It's one of the things that gives some students quite a bit of anxiousness. They're not sure what to expect, and the idea of going to live with another family is intimidating. It also becomes one of the most impactful parts of the trip for them. And we haven't had any students come back from Ecuador and say, I did not like my homestay experience. All of them are positive, despite the butterflies in the beginning. And performance. The 9th grade 4-point program ties into the English and history classes. And at the end of our 4-point travel experience, the students will be exploring their own ideas and coming up with, as Ted says, an idea worth spreading. They'll create their own TED Talks and perform them to each other and to the school. Also, through our travels, the students will be journaling. They will have time to free journal, but then they also will have some specific prompts that they're asked to respond to and think about while they're traveling, while they're immersed in the country. Okay, so where is Ecuador? Ecuador is that red in the northwest of South America. The equator runs right through the country, east-west, and the Andes Mountains also run right through the country, north-south. Ecuador is a place of extremes. You can be right on the equator and it's hot, and then within just a few hours drive, you can be up at a high elevation and touching snow. There are so many extremes, which makes it such a rich country to visit. It's relatively small, yet has so much to offer. This is our route. We will be flying into Quito. We'll spend 2 nights in Quito. Quito is at a high elevation, so we will spend a couple days there before we head down to Chaupi. And in Chaupi, we'll be staying at a lodge called Corrales Viejos, which translates to Old Corrals. It's a working ranch and farm. We will become part of what happens on that ranch. We'll be guests, but then we'll also be contributing to that community. From there, we'll head down in elevation and down south to a town called Baños de Agua Santa. Baños is a stunningly beautiful town, surrounded by steep mountains, lush vegetation. It also has a rich history with both native cultures and colonization. So we'll learn about all that in Baños. And then from Baños, we'll head around and down again to Tena. In Tena, we'll be in the jungle. Tena is a fairly good-sized city, so when we're in the city, it won't feel quite so much like we're in the jungle. But that's where, the temperature will be warm, the air will be humid. Tena is about a half an hour away from the community of Sinchiwarmi, where we will do our homestay. And then after the homestays, we'll head back up north to Quito. Here's a more detailed look at our itinerary. Let's see. So yeah, we'll have 2 nights in Quito, and we'll be at Corrales Viejos, introduction to the Chagra culture. A highlight from that portion of the trip with the Chagras is a farm-to-table meal where we will be helping to harvest and prepare the meal. From there, we'll travel to Baños de Agua Santa. And in Baños, we are planning a high-impact activity like zip lining, and then we'll travel down to Tena. In Tena, we will start to gain a connection to the jungle, to the place where we are. We'll have an introduction to the Quechua community, and we'll get ready to go camping. We will be spending 1 night in a community called La Libertad, 1 night camping with La Libertad. And while we're there, we will tour their forest gardens, also called chacras. They work with the jungle ecosystem to cultivate what they need to survive. So rather than stripping the jungle, they work in complementary ways to make a living in the Amazon. We'll be working with children there, mostly playing with children, and they'll be helping us with planting trees. We will wake up at 4 a.m. when we're camping for a traditional Wayusa ceremony, where the students will have the opportunity to have a shamanic healing. That's totally optional. We'll do some work in their agroforestry chakras, and then we'll travel to Sinchiwarmi. We'll have an introduction to the Sinchiwarmi community. We'll meet the homestay families, and then we'll spend 3 nights with the homestay families. A little bit about the homestay. The women of Sinchiwarmi and the families are all prepared to welcome our students into their homes. They do this with other groups of people as well. They offer homestays. And all the community is small. So a student in a house with Sophia might be able to see the house where Neda lives, where the other students are. So even though they're on their own for their homestay, they're not far from each other. And another thing about the Ecuador homestays, most often our students do the homestay in pairs. So they will most likely have a partner for the homestay. After the homestay, we'll head up to Papayacta Hot Springs, a natural hot springs on the way back to Quito, and then we'll spend the night in Quito and come on home. A little bit more info. Oh, some emergency numbers for you to know. The Gould administrator on duty is still the primary contact person for parents. We also will be traveling with the support of International SOS. It's a really well-renowned company for helping keep us safe and helping us keep safe if anything unusual does happen. So we are well covered. In Ecuador, we will be, when we're camping, we'll be pretty out of touch, but most of the time, most of the places where we stay, we will have access to technology if we want to use it. So school rules apply while we're traveling, as makes sense. So students are expected to live by the same standards that they do while they are students at Gould. We have separate student contracts that we ask parents and students to read and sign as they pertain to traveling with 9th grade 4-point. One of the things that we do during 4-point when we're traveling is we ask that students do not have with them all the time their technology, their phones, their devices. The way that works for Ecuador is students can have it while we are traveling on the plane, and then when we arrive in Quito, we'll be collecting their phones. So for parents and families, for you to know what's happening with your students, we also will be writing a blog just about every night, or just about every day, and that will be accessible through our school's website. So you'll still be able to hear stories or read stories and see pictures of your child in Ecuador. If there is an extreme circumstance or some reason that you feel like your son or daughter needs to have a phone or needs to get in touch with you at any time during the trip, let us know your specific situation and we can make arrangements. We have found that for students, one of the things that they value the most as they look back on the trip is the time being freed from our constant connection with technology. So it's a treat and an opportunity that doesn't come up very easily or very often. So we hope that you'll support us with that. Dress code in Ecuador is not very challenging. It's not a particularly conservative country, so students should just have clothing that is neat and in good repair. Cameras. We advise that students bring a camera or some other recording device because they won't have their phones. We do have a couple cameras that Gould can loan, so if you don't have a camera, let us know and we can help you out. Through the fall and the winter, we accept donations for Tanzania, Ecuador, and Peru. Some things that are useful are school supplies, well, particularly for Ecuador, cleats, balls, clothing. So if you are nearby and you have any of that, we make a collection in Chris Hayward's office, and then we bring some really big bags down with us to share. Packing luggage and money. Students traveling to Ecuador should plan to pack in one carry-on luggage that can fit in the overhead bin and one day pack. So your day pack is like the size of a book bag, and your carry-on, you just need to make sure that it can be stashed above your seat. As for liquids, we will also be bringing a couple of big bags that we will check, big bags of donations, so we can collect from the students things like shampoo and bug spray and other liquids that they wouldn't be able to carry on the plane. Ecuador uses the same money, US dollars. Students should bring anywhere between $100 and $300 for optional souvenirs and snacks. They won't need money, but it's nice to have. It's difficult to use large bills in Ecuador. So a $50 bill would be really difficult to use. 20s and smaller are recommended. All right, here's the packing list. So there has been some careful thought that went into this packing list, and everything on it that does not say optional is required. So things like synthetic or lightweight button-down shirts, those are for sun protection and insect protection. We are on the equator, and so when we're on the equator at elevation, the sun is especially intense. And then we're down in the jungle, and as you might imagine, there are plenty of insects in the jungle. During the day, they don't tend to bother us, but in the evening, we need to protect ourselves from the insects. So long pants and long sleeves, even though it'll be warm, it's more important to protect ourselves from the insects. So feel free to pause on this page and have a close look. And if you have any questions, please do be in touch with us. We're happy to help sort through this list or help get things that are not there, or that you don't have, I mean. Water shoes, I would say, are really important. We'll be active in the water, so something like flip-flops that won't stay on your feet do not work. Something that will secure to your feet are required. And a headlamp with extra batteries, especially for your homestay at night. You'll want to be able to read or journal while you're laying in your bed. These are our flight logistics. We leave on March 1st at 8 a.m. all together on a bus from Gould. We travel through El Salvador and arrive in Quito around midnight. And then on March 14th, we arrive back in Boston at 8:21 p.m. Arrangements should be made to either pick up your student or a connecting flight back home, or students can also take the Gould bus back to Bethel. Questions? So when we did this presentation over Parent and Family Weekend, there were some questions that I'll go over. One of them was, will you see wild animals? Not really. We will see monkeys near Sinchiwarmi. We're likely to see monkeys at least. But as far as wild animals, in the community of La Libertad, where we go camping, that community is right on the edge of a protected forest. And the members of that community have done some subsistence hunting in that national forest. So the animals are pretty wary of humans. Some of the animals that people tend to be afraid of, like, will you see spiders? If we want to see spiders, we will see spiders. Will we see snakes? I've only seen one snake in Ecuador, and it was on the road. So one thing to keep in mind if people are nervous about wild animals is they really don't want to see us. So we probably won't see many. There are dogs, and there are some dogs in the communities that we visit who are very friendly and like to be petted and interact with. And then there are some dogs who are stray dogs and street dogs, and we will definitely want to avoid them. Another question was, where will we stay? When we're traveling, and how will we travel? I'll answer both of those. When we travel in a private van. We have a driver. Often it's Don Sanchez, who is a very sweet retired police officer. And sometimes it's another younger man, Arturo, who's also wonderful. Their vans they fit our whole group. They're in great repair. They're comfortable. And then we travel with a company called Amazon Learning, and Andy Gavilanes will join us also for the whole trip. And he drives his own pickup truck. So if anything were to happen on the road, we do have a second vehicle with us. The roads that we travel are also major roads, major paved roads. It's very easy traveling the route that we're taking. And where do we stay? We stay in places that are not quite like hotels and not quite, they're a little bit more similar to bed and breakfast than a hotel. Most places where we stay, we'll sleep there and then have breakfast there and then be on our own for the rest of the day, on our own doing activities with Amazon Learning. All of the places that we stay they all have showers, they all have clean sheets, they all have bathrooms in the rooms. Students will be sharing rooms with each other, so they won't be alone. But every place we stay is quite comfortable. The other question was about the homestays, and the fact, I already talked about this, but the homestay families' homes are relatively close to each other, and our students will most likely be in pairs. And another thing about the homestay is we will see each other every day. Like the students will see Todd Siekman and me every day during their homestay. That's because we come together as a big group and do some activities like going fishing on the river. So do feel free to be in touch. My email is available, Tracy Wilkerson. It's wilkerst@gouldacademy.org. And we are happy to answer any questions or be in touch for anything. We're looking forward to traveling with your children and looking forward to getting to know them better.